All right. So I wanted to test what I consider to be the 4 best masts on the market right now. I've been riding for the past year the Unifoil Katana mast, which when I first got it was blown away by how stiff it was. And my friends that ride other brands all agreed, like, this mast is insanely stiff. So when other masts came out, I was like, curious to see if they could be better than the Katana. So the masts that I test were the Katana 750, the Progression 800, which is the new Unifoil mast, the NoLimitz 78 for Unifoil specifically, and then the new CEDRUS Evolution, which was a 75. There's a little difference in the total height of it, but it's just a little longer than the 750 Katana and a little shorter than the 78 NoLimitz. The first test I wanted to do was just straight up compare them all in weight. So first up was the Katana at 4 pounds 10.2 ounces. The Progression 800 came in at 4 pounds 8.5 ounces. The CEDRUS Evolution was 4 pounds 4 ounces, and the NoLimitz was 2 pounds 15 ounces. I do have to put an asterisk on that with the CEDRUS because we have a prototype plate as well as prototype adapter. So in speaking with Kyle, he did say that they would be lighter for production, but I'm basing the test off what I have, so that's where it ranked in terms of total weight. The next test that I wanted to do was a controlled test, or at least as controlled as you can do in the water. I'm no scientist. I'm not taking anything to a lab. So what I figured was dock starting in a harbor, relatively flat, calm conditions, I could do a straight up comparison of the mast speeds as well as the bend flex. I do need to say on the mast, there's 2 different flexes that I really focus on. There's the bend, which if you just think about the mast just bending from its length, and then there's the torsional twist, which is what I feel mostly in the surf when you're doing a turn. You can feel the mast twisting on itself and loading up on the foil. And all that equates to delay in reaction of the foil in the water. So this first test was dock starts. I took all 4 masts down and I was specifically testing for the bend as well as the speed through the water. First up, I went with the Progression 800, which I know to be a very stiff mast and also a relatively slow mast. It is the thickest of the bunch. So I got to it. For the test, I was using the Progression 200 front wing with a medium fuse and a 14.5 Progression tail. I felt super locked in. The pump was direct. There was almost no bend. I did feel like I was going pretty slow through the water. But in terms of being able to have like repetitive pump and nice control feel, it was great. Next, I went to my Old Faithful, the Katana. It was surprisingly, it felt flexy. You ride something for so long, and then when you get something better and you go back to that old thing, you're surprised at how did I make this work for so long? But instantly, I felt the bend. In every pump, if I wasn't, pushing straight down in the middle, I could feel that kind of rocking left and right. It was also noticeably faster through the water than the Progression mast, with the thinner profile as well as it being tapered more, getting even smaller down towards the bottom. If I rode higher, it was much more efficient than the Progression through the water. Next up was the NoLimitz, which again, it got even faster through the water and it felt stiffer than the Katana. I wouldn't say it was as stiff as the Progression, but it was noticeably faster through the water, easier to pump than the Katana. Last up, I used the CEDRUS Evolution, and it felt probably as stiff as the Progression mast. It's really hard to say just because you can't tell if it's a bobble or if it's just the way that the water is moving, but that CEDRUS mast felt right in line with the Progression 800, and it felt a little bit faster even than the NoLimitz. yeah, so the CEDRUS there was really good through the water. It really blew me away with its overall feel through the water while pumping around. I did try and do like a little flick with all of them just to see if I could feel that little twist, and it didn't really equate to much. There's just not much torsion or load in that little flick, so I couldn't really test the torsion or the twist in the mast there. But yeah, overall the CEDRUS I'd say was the winner through the pumping, just with speed and as well as the stiffness. The last test that I took all the masts to was just a pure surf, like a surf contest really. I took them all out in basically the same conditions. You know, the tide was changing a little bit, but it was glassy, calm day, great waves, and started off with the progression. For this test, I was using the 140 medium fuse 13.5 progression tail. You know, I was thinking with the smaller front wing, the flex and twist and bend wouldn't be as noticeable between the different masts, and I was wrong. Right away, starting off with the progression mast, it felt super stiff, super direct. I could put that thing exactly where I wanted it. With it being a little bit slower, it did keep me in the pocket better, so I could really jam up in the lip on some turns. And with it being so stiff, I could pull it back under my feet, really controlled, come out from my, you know, like a snap or little blow tail through the lip. But the progression mast felt great. It just felt so slow, and I could feel that pumping back out, and I could feel that dropping into, like, you know, a wave that started to stand up. I could feel the mast really starting to kind of max out the speed of the foil much sooner than it would normally on other masts. I went to the Katana next, and I was blown away at how flexy it felt for something that I've been using for so long. You know, right away I went to do my first bottom turn, and I basically bogged and had to like pull back and try again because I felt the mast bending and twisting compared to the progression mast, which again is up there as the stiffest. So after some time, after a couple waves, I started to feel it out and got back into my groove with the Katana. But there is a noticeable flex difference between the progression and the Katana mast. It again felt much faster through the water when I got more comfortable with the way that it was feeling, you know, with the bend and twist. Pumping it felt fine, much more efficient through the water than the progression, but I was not feeling nearly as locked in my turns, not nearly as direct control of the foil. From there, I switched over to the NoLimitz, the 78, and I got that stiffness that I wanted back, and then I got a little more speed out of it again. I mean, right away, just my first little pop-up, you know, chip shot inside on the foam, pumping back out. I was like, oh, this is so much easier. You know, there's less drag. So that was great. Once I got on a wave, started doing some turns, I felt that stiffness. I felt nice and controlled. I will say with the NoLimitz, there's something about a mast that has the same profile all the way through. No taper, no change in the cord, nothing like that. It gives you a very predictable feel. So if you're, you know, halfway down or 3/4 of the way down or whatever, you have the same feel in the water. So when you roll that thing over, you're not feeling any sort of change from the mast. You know, if you pop your tip out, that's going to obviously affect you a little bit, but the mast doesn't adjust, doesn't make you have to adjust or change your speed or anything like that. It's the same all the way through. And there's something about that is really nice. It's really controlled, and it gives you a really like secure feeling through turns. But yeah, the weight of the mast, I could probably feel it a little bit in my lip turns, like little slashes. When you go to push the foil up and there's just, you know, 2 pounds less of weight, it floats a little bit better. It makes it harder to control through whitewash, but on a nice clean face, I think that weight does help out. Whereas like the progression mast, when I was pushing it in whitewash, it almost kind of bullies the wave around, helps you push through it. But yeah, the less weight does kind of help on a clean face with that turn. You know, you can feel it kind of just floating a little bit better. Lastly, I went to the CEDRUS Evolution, and I mean, that mast does it all. It felt really smooth, really fast, and extremely stiff. So stiffer than the NoLimitz again, and the speed was right there. I will say though, with the CEDRUS, because of the change in shape of the profile all the way down, when you're riding that, if you do go low on the mast, you will feel the increased drag. And then with this prototype collar that I was using, if I went too low, it was almost like hitting seaweed. It created a lot of drag. Typically I was riding high enough that I wasn't even feeling the adjusted section at the top of the mast. But through a turn, you can, if you really roll over hard, you can start to feel that difference in the foil. There's a little increase in drag. So that's just something to consider with that shape, with that, how the mast tapers and bends in and goes back out. It's a crazy shape. It's really cool looking, and it is functional as well as, has a different look to it. So I'm a fan of it. But yeah, the big thing with the CEDRUS, with that change in shape where the cord comes in so short, it really allows you to whip that mast really tight in a pocket. Whereas like the NoLimitz, the Progression, even the Katana, they're all relatively the same amount of cord. It tends to kind of steer you through a turn, kind of like a surfboard fin. With the Progression, or with the CEDRUS Evolution, that short cord section, it's like having a smaller fin, so it's more pivoty, it's more pocket. You can really push it around, and in turns it just feels amazing. Combined with the stiffness, you can really arc that thing super tight in a turn, and it just holds for you. It's really good. So in the surf, I'd say again, I was really blown away by the CEDRUS Evolution. It just worked really well. I didn't mind the added weight from the NoLimitz, compared to the NoLimitz. I guess I'm kind of used to that weight though, riding the Unifoil masts for so long. There's just some last couple things that I wanted to touch on with the differences of these masts. Something that, you might not consider that kind of does come into play is the plate size. How big your plate is determines how much adjustment you can make in forward or back of your boxes. And that can be a big thing, getting the right feel on your board. So, the Katana, for example, has a huge plate. It doesn't give you a whole lot of room to move back and forward. Whereas the new Progression mast, it's much smaller, and the front of the Progression mast is ramped up, so it's even a little bit more efficient, when you're paddling it. The NoLimitz plate as well as the CEDRUS are both fairly small plates, which is good. So you can really adjust and fine tune where you want to be in your boxes. Adaptability is another thing I want to talk about. Obviously if you buy a Unifoil mast, you're using it on Unifoil wings. So there's not much adaptability there. NoLimitz, I've seen guys using the, like they buy the Takuma mast, and then you can buy like a lift adapter or whatever different adapter, which is cool. But I don't really consider that adaptability because there's like a big fat knuckle on top of your fuse, and that's just going to be drag, and that's not what I think anybody wants, especially if you're trying to buy like a top end super performance oriented mast, and then you have this big draggy knuckle piece. That kind of defeats the purpose. So in terms of adaptability, CEDRUS, it works on every foil brand, which is huge. Like, for me, I'm going to ride Unifoil wings, period, right? So it doesn't matter to me. But as the typical user, your regular everyday foiler, being able to use, your lift 70 for tow days, and then your Progression 140 for, surf days. And then, if you really like these new Armstrong downwind wings and you want to use one of those for downwinding, you can just buy one mast, which is pretty cool. And then lastly, price. CEDRUS definitely won or lost in the price range. It's the most expensive mast on the market for a reason, but it is. NoLimitz comes in a little below that and still just above the Unifoil, and most foil brand production masts. If you think about it just being a specialty item, you're going to have to pay for that. And then, the Unifoil masts, obviously, I think they're priced very competitively in the market, as well as if you buy a complete package, you're going to get even better deal on them. So, there's that to consider. So I guess overall, what everyone wants to know, the overall ranking. I hope I don't get fired for this, but I'm going to say CEDRUS takes the overall win. Just with all the components combined, it stood out as being the best mast. It just works the best. NoLimitz, not far behind. Again, a really good mast. If weight is your biggest thing that you care about, then there you go. That might be the thing that pushes you over the limit. But yeah, NoLimitz is right there. And then the Unifoil masts, I would say if you have a Katana, there's no need to throw it away, or don't think you have to get a progression mast. The Katana is a great mast. It's a little bit faster. It's right there in terms of weight. It's basically the same weight. So, if you're downwinding and winging, you might like the Katana better. If you're just prone surfing, or, if you really care about like having the most direct feel, then yeah, the progression is going to be better. So you kind of have to tailor it to what your riding style is. But yeah, the progression and Katana mast are both really good, and I still use both of them for different purposes. Typically for me, I'm using the progression mast on my 170 and 200 wings, and then when the surf's bigger and I want to go faster, I'll throw the 140 or the 125 on, and that's where I'm at with those. But so yeah, that's my review of those 4 masts. I hope this helps you guys make an informed decision on which one you want to get for yourself, and hopefully I'll see you out in the water.